All right. Listeners of the internet, members of planet Earth, friends, family, junkies, scumbags, and assholes. I think that covers the majority of my base.
I think you might not have left anybody out.
I think that covers, my base. I have some news for you f***ing people. I have a guest with me right now who is a very funny man. He is a radio broadcasting legend. He is a stand-up comedian located out of New York. He was the head writer on the Howard Stern Show for 15 years. He is an inspiration to me and many others. I just can't say enough nice things about this guy. Boy, oh boy. With no further ado, please welcome to the broadcast, Jackie the Joke Man Martling. Jackie, how are you, man?
I'm very good. I have 2 new jokes in my repertoire from the last week, and I just found out I lost all of my money, and my girlfriend's in a good mood, and the sun is out, and I'm old, and I don't really care about anything. And it's a pleasure to talk to Seattle.
Yes.
I've never been there. I was planning on coming out and adding to the suicide rate, but then I changed my mind.
Well,
Now, am I talking to a radio station? Am I talking to an internet? Am I talking to you and your mother in your basement?
yes.
I don't even ask questions anymore. Everybody lies. I say, hey, tell me about your station. Oh, I'm on Spotify, Apple, and they list 14 things. I say, how many people are going to hear this? They're like 6, so everybody lies,
Yes, so
if somebody says 4,000, you can believe them. When they say 150,000, you know that nobody's here.
Yeah, that's not a real station. No, so I am on a station here in Seattle. It's called Rainy Dog Radio. It's an internet station. There's no FCC regulations, which is fantastic news. So we can really get silly. But yeah, man, I can't even begin to thank you for coming on. I'm such a big fan of yours. I see Rodney Dangerfield in the background.
I always have him on my shoulder in these things. I actually move it back there because it's so fun. I apologize for the windows. I don't have the windows blocked, so you got the glaring sun. I usually do these things at night, so the place looks a lot sexier. But what can I tell you?
I think it looks great. It really, I really am getting the aesthetic of Jokeland. Am I looking at Jokeland right now? Is this where the magic happens?
You are looking at
wow,
my garage, which is
look at that.
That's my life, Everything I ever did is here.
Really? Like I heard that you catalog and save all of your jokes. Is that correct? Is that where it is?
Well, everything is in, it's funny. I put out albums in 79, 80, 81. And then when CDs hit, I put all the jokes onto CDs, and I just been accumulating. I mean, I have 8 tracks and cassette tapes and 3/4-inch videos and 1-inch videos and loose leafs and computer files. I mean, I just have more, a couple of people told me I should, have some kind of like a museum or library, because it's not just Jackie, it's just comedy, it's just, it's fun stuff. But I've had interviewers here and their heads explode,
Yeah.
I mean, I have the original scripts to the bits we did on the Stern Show in the late 80s that are like, they're in Howard's handwriting. I mean, I have so much stuff here that's, I'm sure, is worth $1 billion to a serious collector. But like anything, just like art, a picture by Van Gogh, a painting by Van Gogh is worth a fortune to somebody. Me, I wouldn't wipe my ass with it, because I wouldn't know any better.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. If you're ever out in New York, come be my guest. I'll make you a steak or I'll have a few laughs.
That sounds fantastic. Well, right back at you. If you're ever in Seattle, I could find out how to make a steak, and then we'll get going. Jackie, one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on the show is because it seems that you have a very interesting sort of philosophy about comedy. I read an article about that you wrote a while back, and you basically told a joke and you explained why it worked. But you did this in a really interesting way. You sort of explained the variables to a joke, sort of mathematically and algorithmically. You explained the...
I don't know specifically what you... first of all, I tell people, I always never start these things without saying, the reason I do any of these things is to basically try and make $2. Have you heard of Cameo.com?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Well, I do Cameo.com. And if you go to Cameo.com/Jackie Martling, I do 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever. And a lot of people do this. When they first came out with it, I said, wait a minute, I'm off the Stern Show, and my star has certainly plummeted, but I'm not this low yet. And then I saw everybody was doing it, and I started doing it. And it's so funny, Trevor, because if you're a comic or a performer, you really need to do it.
I'm sure,
It always sounds like such horse crap, but it's a real thing, And with the pandemic and freaking out, I don't get to do my jokes. And I was made for this Cameo, because you say, hey, we say hello to my mother. She loves poop jokes. She's turning 58. She hates her husband. And whatever they tell me, there's jokes about every single thing. So I just go down the bullet points, and I've got like 100 5-star reviews from these things. I don't make a fortune, but I make money. But the important thing is like my methadone. I tell some jokes, I laugh. I tell some jokes, and I laugh. And it's enough to get me through the day. So it's more for me than it is for them. But I always tell people I'm not a comedian. I'm a joke teller, which is a big difference. Like, I'm not talking about, my family and my wife and how much the world, I set them up, knock them down, set them up, which I've been doing my entire life. I didn't even start telling jokes on stage as a comedian until I was like 31 years old. I mean, I was a musician, and I just happen to know every joke in the world because that's what I committed myself to for God knows whatever reason. Now, whatever interview you're talking about, because I usually don't, I try not to go into that crap, because the minute you start talking about comedy, it ceases to be funny.
That's a very good point, yeah.
So tell me, where were you reading? Because, you try not to sound pompous, but you also try to, like if you're talking about the stuff I say about you want it to be in the present tense, and you don't want to waste any, you don't want to use any words from the punchline.
Yeah.
In the bulk. Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about, though? Because I've done those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. I forget specifically where the article was, but it just seemed.
Well, something very. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Like, I used to get so upset because in the old Playboy jokes, it'd be like, the handsome young lass sauntered into the bar and mentioned to the bartender, "Excuse me, sir, but I couldn't help but," and I'm like, no! A girl goes into a bar and says to the bartender, that's all the information you need.
Right.
A fat girl? Okay. A pretty girl? Okay. You only need what you need, and everything else is superfluous. And because I've stood at the bar, believe me, I've stood at the bar for 73 years listening to people go on, and I've listened to every joke that anybody has ever wanted to tell me, because somewhere I find one that slipped through the cracks, and I go nuts when I get a new joke. But if you don't listen to them all, you're not going to hear them. And I hear people go on, and I'm like, oh, sometimes they talk for 5 minutes before I realize it's a joke I already know, So that's the kind of instructional thing that I talk about and I listen to.
Yeah. So did you sort of always have that feeling, like the going on and on, or is that something where you've just been doing it for so long that you?
Well, when you've been doing it for so long, it's funny. My cousin told a joke. All this stuff is in my autobiography. My autobiography is The Joke Man, Bow to Stern, and people are loving it because it explains a lot of stuff. And I heard a joke when I was in third grade. My cousin told a filthy joke, and it, for whatever reason, it stuck with me. And since then, I seem to have remembered every dirty joke I ever heard. And the only reason I know that is once I started getting famous, people started asking you questions. And it's always the frequently asked questions, when was your first joke, or how'd you get into this? And you can't answer, I don't know, I don't remember. You got to go back in your mind and find the answers. And it turned out that all these jokes just stuck to me. Like in fifth grade, when you're going through the list of books you can buy, and this girl's buying The Yearling, and this guy's buying this book, I'm buying the joke books and reading the joke books and then telling jokes. And they were such a part of me that I didn't even give it any thought. And the first time I went to catch a rising star, just to have a look, with no intention of ever being a comedian. I was a guy who told jokes in his band, and I got up and told a joke, when nobody was looking. And I came off stage, and the MC said, "Wow, that was a great joke. You should come back here." And I said, "Well, you've heard that joke." And he goes, "No."
Oh, wow,
I never
really?
heard that joke. And I said to myself, meanwhile, the guy's been a friend of mine for 40 years, a very dear friend, David Say. But he was the MC at Catch a Rising Star. And I swear to God, the proverbial light bulb went off over my head. I was like, if the MC at Catch a Rising Star in Manhattan hasn't heard that joke, maybe there's other people that haven't heard that joke. And It turns out nobody has heard the jokes, and the people who have forgotten them. I'm just this weirdo that they stuck in my head. So I'm thinking anybody that grew up in the United States when they were a kid heard that joke and knew it. And it turns out nobody knows it. The ones that heard it don't know it, least of all the comedians. And I suddenly realized I was sitting on a gold mine, but I never thought about tapping into it until my last band broke up. And I said, you know what? I'll go on stage. And instead of just playing my songs and telling jokes, I went from being a guitar player who told jokes to being a joke teller who played the guitar. And I was just up there telling these jokes, and the guys in the city hear, "Oh, you hear about that guy on Long Island? Yeah, he just goes up and tells jokes." Because they're thinking I'm just some guy that picked up a joke book and started reading out of the joke book.
Right.
And meanwhile, these are jokes that have, just been ingrained into me. It was like organic, the way they just absorbed into my soul for decades and decades. And in my band in the 70s, we told jokes. And on break, people would come up and say, "Jackie, I got a joke for you." Because if people know you, it's like a gunslinger.
Yeah.
If people know you know jokes, they all have a joke for you. And I got so many I got to write a book about the great stories of people literally pulling their hair out because they can't believe that I know every joke. And then in 1975, we'd be on break and somebody'd come up to me at the bar and say, "I got a joke for you." And I used to say, "All right, I'm going to count down from 10. And by the time I get to 0, if I don't know the joke you're telling, I'll buy you a drink." This is 50 years. I never bought a drink.
Really?
If somebody said an Indian and a cowboy are walking along in the desert, within 2 seconds, "Oh, this is that joke about the nun and the priest and the canoe." I mean, I could see the parallels, and I knew them all so well. It's funny, the guy that I played guitar with, that taught me to play guitar, that I went to kindergarten with, still my best friend, 68 years later, sent me a joke the other day. And I wrote back to him and said, "That's a great story." Because I was at the Cannes Film Festival, and Michael Madsen, do you know who that is? The actor?
Don't, no.
You know him if you saw him. He's a famous character actor. Reservoir Dogs and Tarantino films, stuff like that.
Sure.
And he came up, "All right, Mr. Joke Man, I got a joke for you." A guy walks into a doctor's office, and there's a dog sitting there. And I just looked at him and said, "Yeah, he never did any of that shit." And his jaw dropped. And I said, "All right, Michael, now I'll give you one on the same subject." I told him a joke on the same subject. And he got down on his knees. This crowded Cannes, high-end party. He's on his knees. "Joke man, I hail you," because I just know the jokes that quickly. And, the joke he was alluding to was a guy goes into a doctor's office, sits down, there's a dog, and the dog says, "Hello." The guy says, "You can talk?" And the dog says, "Of course I can talk." He says, "You're kidding?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, all of us can't talk, but I can talk." And I was actually pretty valuable when they found out I could talk. They put me in the CIA because I could just go into a room and people had no problem talking in front of me. And I picked up on a lot of secrets from a lot of foreign countries. And I was very valuable. But I retired about 10 years ago, and I just hang out here at the doctor's office. And then it's time for him to go in. He goes in and he says to the doctor, "My God, your dog is unbelievable." And the doctor says, "What do you mean? He's not so special." And the guy said, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I work for the CIA." And the doctor says, "He's full of shit. He never did any of that stuff." Which is just so fucking stupid.
That's
so
really dumb, but it's fantastic.
So Michael Madsen says the guy goes to the doctor's office and there's a dog there, and I said, yeah, he never did any of that shit, and he's like, whoa. And then the joke I told him was the guy sees a sign, talking dog, $5,000. He goes in and says, I'd like to buy the dog, but you got to prove it to me. And the guy says, no problem. He says, Fido, what's it feel like when you sit on sandpaper? And Fido goes, rough. He says, what do you think, I'm stupid? He says, hold on, there's more demonstrations. Fido, what's on top of a house? He goes, roof. He says, you're an asshole. Wait, I have not concluded the demonstration. He says, Fido, who's the greatest Yankee ball player of all time? And the dog goes, Ruth. He says, fuck you, I'm out of here. You're an asshole. And the guy leaves, and the dog turns to the owner and says, who was it, DiMaggio? So 2 jokes on the exact same subject. And I got, and by now there's a crowd around us,
Yeah.
So and that's the kind of story. I have a million stories like that of famous people who, because everybody thinks that they have jokes that nobody's heard.
Yeah.
And they haven't. Except for me, and it makes people nuts. Makes them, and so it's just really fun.
Yeah.
That's all. So I have nothing to offer except my stupid jokes. But what's funny is for 15 years I sat there with Howard, and I never gave him a joke.
Really?
Everything I gave him was a comment.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
It was never 2 Jews going to a bar.
Yeah.
What it is if you were talking to a girl and having a conversation, and I was sitting there, I'm funny.
Yeah.
And I'm going to think of something funny to say in the middle of a conversation, only instead of saying it, I'm writing it down and I'm putting it in front of you. So you get to pepper your conversation with my thoughts, which made you way, 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 way more funny.
Yeah.
And it should have made me way, way, way more rich, which it didn't.
Yeah, that's sort of an odd arrangement. And, I don't think a lot of people, it's funny, man. We've been talking for 10, 15 minutes. And surprisingly, you don't seem like a bitter dude. You seem like you seem content. You seem...
Anybody who thinks I'm bitter only thinks that because they've heard Howard say it.
Right, exactly.
Or they've repeated, or else they've said, me being bitter is the election being stolen. If enough people say it, there's nothing to be bitter about, I asked my boss for a raise. He said no, and I left. I mean, there's way, way more to it than that, of course. Well, what is there to be bitter about? I created the job I did and made money at. I created that gig, which is a pretty nice claim to fame. And now a lot of people, it's going on. It just celebrated, if that's the word, celebrated 20 years off the show, and people talk about it like I left yesterday.
Yeah, that's very good
because
point.
the old shows were good and they were fun. There's no real craziness about it. Of course, the stuff they play is all the stuff that puts me in a bad light. And I played along really well. I'd write insults about myself, which people still have trouble wrapping their brain around.
Totally, yeah.
A lot of this. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I also don't think a lot of people kind of understand or can grasp the significance of a head writer role. I mean, the head writer in any program, any TV. I mean, shit, the head writer, head producer for music, they're writing the song, And I think, from my perspective, it really seemed like you were a main architect in pushing that show along and making it, the most famous radio broadcast of all time.
Not. I really wasn't the architect. Howard was the architect, and Fred was as much the architect as Howard. But the thing of head writer. What happened was we moved to Channel 9 to do TV, and they said, we can't credit you guys as writers. And, of course, we're on the radio show, so nobody ever said these guys are writers. There's still people that have no idea that I ever was writing stuff for Howard. I laughed hard and fooled around, and they made fun of me, which was almost enough to justify me being in the room. If anybody knew that I was writing the insults that he was saying about me, their heads explode.
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
And when they find out or they come in and they see it, remind me to tell you a Caitlyn Jenner story. But so it was very strange. And we went, and they said, we can't credit you as writers. You're going to be segment producers. And I said, that's bullshit. We're writers.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? In fact, I'm the last guy. When I started full-time on the show, I was writing notes and putting them in front of Howard. And then I gave Fred paper and pen because he was passing me notes, but I had to rewrite them and put them in front of Howard. And I said, look, Fred, write big and write neat. But everything went through me. So I was the last one to decide what went in front of Howard. And I said, so that makes me not just writer, that makes me head writer. And they're like, well, this is the Guild show. We can't do that. I said, well, then I ain't doing the show. And then for years, I don't know how much of the show you listened to. It was like, I'm head writer. Hey, I'm head. They made fun of me, as always, because I stuck to my guns. Because I wasn't asking for something I didn't deserve, and nobody had ever called us writers before. And finally, here's our chance to be known as writers, and we just weren't. But that's literally what I was doing. I was the head writer. I was the last one to decide what's going in front of Howard. And as far as so much of the show, it was his construction. I just added to it. I just made what he did much funnier.
Sure.
When we went to mornings, I was there 2 days a week, and I went from 2 days a week to 5 days very quick because of a pretty stark contrast. Because he'd talk, and then he'd have a really funny line.
Yeah.
And he'd talk and have a really funny line. And when I wasn't there, he'd talk and sometimes have a funny line and sometimes not. And it really, really, really made a difference.
Right.
And then we went to Pluto.
Yeah.
And I had a lot to do with it. And I didn't ask for, the world. I just thought I should be cut in more. And it's like anybody. You work for a boss. You think you deserve this. He thinks you deserve that. There's always going to be a ridiculous discrepancy. So,
right.
And that's, but you can't be bitter. If I ask for more, you can't ask for more money and hold out and walk out unless you're prepared to leave. What's to be bitter? They didn't fire me. They didn't tell me, get out of here.
Yeah.
We don't want you here anymore. They made me an offer that makes people choke, especially people, because so many people, especially then, they would have paid money to sit in the seat where, you get to sit there with Howard in the studio. And I said, I don't get to. I'm working. It's like, hey, look at Mickey Mantle. What do you mean you want money? You get to play baseball every day. Well, you asshole,
Well, yeah, something.
But it's funny. It's so unique,
It is. It really is unique. And something that I really admire about you is just, listening back to, I'm from, I didn't grow up during the golden years of Stern or anything like that, but it certainly was so, comedically genuine and funny that it's so many different generations can find it and adapt to it and stuff. Something that I really admire about you is that, you listen to those old clips and you just hear your Sharpie going all the time, man. I mean, you were working, you were constantly writing jokes, and you could always tell when you had a line. One of my favorite lines in the world was, I think Ringo Starr was a guest, and Robin, she had a difficult time. It was a surprise guest or something, and she wasn't a big fan of, the questions that he was answering. And you wrote a line, and then Howard said, Robin, if the Pope were here, you'd kick him in the balls. And that is one of my favorites. I just absolutely love that. And you could just hear your...
But I can't guarantee you. See, this is funny. There's so much funny stuff. You never know who knew anything. I went to a concert... I went to see the Subdudes a couple of years ago at Iridium in Manhattan, and I was sitting with this producer who's an NBC producer. And he said, wow, Jackie the Joke Man, so nice, blah, blah, blah. I was such a big fan, blah, blah, blah. And we got to talking. And he said, what do you mean you were writing? I said, I was writing a real lot of the lines Howard was saying. And he's like, really? And I'm like, this is a producer, a television producer, because people are not listening to analyze the show. It's like watching Carson. You don't watch Carson, listen to me date myself, but you didn't watch Johnny Carson and say, gee, I wonder who wrote that joke.
Right.
You're laughing at Carson. You're enjoying yourself. He never thought about it. There's a girl I lived with a couple of years, and the Sharpie thing is so funny because we were on in San Francisco on the E Show, which was the television part of the Howard Stern show.
Right.
Do you know what that was?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And we were on there with the E Show before the radio show was syndicated there. And this girl would watch the E Show, and she'd see this guy with his head down, and she's like, what is that guy doing? I wonder what that guy's doing. But meanwhile, if you worked with Sharpies, many people have or use them, but everybody doesn't know that. But if you have a Sharpie, you use it for a while. After X amount of time, it starts to squeak.
Right.
It doesn't squeak right away. And then you use it until the squeak is enough to drive a blind man crazy. And, so this, all of a sudden we come on the air in San Francisco, and she hears a Sharpie, and then there's a pause. And then Howard says something, and I laugh. And then she hears a Sharpie, and there's a pause, and she says, that guy is writing what Howard's saying.
Right.
And she got a hold of me, and we wound up she's brilliant. We had a great relationship. And so many people didn't know that. But so many people also say, oh, Jackie, I could always tell when you wrote a joke because you laugh so hard. And I said, that is not, it's true a lot, but not necessarily true. No matter what Howard says, Robin goes, Robin, I got up at 3:00 today. Robin, I have a booger in my, but I laugh in relation to how funny something is.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I screamed a lot of the time because at my own stuff, because if I didn't think it's funny, I wouldn't have put it in front of him.
Totally.
But Fred would also give me stuff to give him. And Howard would say stuff on his own. And often I'd come home and Nancy say, you know what the funniest thing you wrote today was? Such and such. I go, Nan, I didn't write that. Fred wrote that. But you laugh so hard. I laughed so hard because it was that funny.
Yeah.
The funniest thing today was such and such. Oh, Howard said that on his own. But you laughed so hard because it was so freaking funny.
Yeah.
I wasn't laughing to blow my own horn. I was laughing at how funny I thought. I know it was a laugh track, and I know it was show business, but there was a pecking order of how hard you laugh, just like you laugh this hard at this joke and this hard at this joke, and and that's just how it was. And everybody thought they always thought they knew. So that kick Pope in the balls, that really does sound like something I wrote.
Oh yeah.
And what's really funny is I have every note I ever wrote. So if you told me, well, it was the date. If we found out the date that Ringo was on, if you're sure that's the date it was from, if I found out it was August 15th, 1996, I have every note I ever wrote for Howard in my mother's attic. I could go find that note.
That is crazy.
In fact, that's your homework.
That's my
find
homework.
out are you sure it was the day Ringo was on the show?
I watched it just yesterday. I'm 100% positive. Yeah. I'll find out the date.
Find out the date, and that's it was really funny because Howard used to always say, oh, Jackie's never impressed by anything. He's never impressed. And Ringo came in and sat down, and Howard said, Ringo, Jackie's been sitting there for years and years, and nothing impresses him. Nothing I ever do. But hold on a second. Jackie, I got a Beatle sitting here.
Yeah,
and I said, all right, Howard. All right, Howard. And he said, Ringo, do me a favor. Say hello to Jackie. And Ringo said, hello, Jackie. He said, well, I said, Howard, you got me. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a Beatle, man. I mean, that's tough
and that's after I completely insulted him so badly that he didn't know, of course. You know about that, right?
No, I didn't know about that.
In the early 90s, Ringo started his thing that went for 2 years, 5 years, 8, however long. There was a thing called the All-Star Comedy
I've heard
All-Star
about this.
Review.
Yeah.
And it was Ringo's All-Star Review, STARR, right?
Yeah.
And so it was big news. A Beatle was going to do a world tour. And he had like Leslie West and Joe Walsh and all these guys. And I got so excited because Leslie said they used to listen to my joke cassettes on the plane, which is, I just imagine all these superstars laughing at my stupid dick jokes. But he was doing a press conference. Oh, an international press conference. I mean, for the world, there were literally, I'm not making this up, there were literally 1 billion people watching live.
Oh my God.
And he fielded questions. And I gave John a question. And Stuttering John asked the question.
Right.
He got off a question. And Ringo gave him the exact right setup line, like they were Abbott and Costello. And it was, and we were listening to it live. I think it went off at 10 o'clock in New York. And me and Fred had deuce chills. They said, all right, Mr. Melendez from K-Rock. And Stuttering John goes, Ringo, what'd you do with the money? And Ringo said, what money? He says, the money your mom gave you for singing lessons. And me and Fred are like, 1 billion people heard that. And Howard even mentioned that in his book. He said, how can I get mad at Jackie? Jesus Christ, he insulted a Beatle in front of 1 million people, you know. But it was so, you know, Ringo went right along, you know, what's he give a fuck, you know?
Yeah, he's Ringo Starr. He could deal with that. You know, it's funny, talking to you, you seem to, I mean, you still love music. I mean, you're obviously a big.
I finally circled around and in like 2006 put out a CD of my records. Have you ever heard any of it?
Oh yeah, I've listened. I played the Pot song a lot on this show. So
the first Pot song or the second Pot song?
It's the second one, the newer rendition.
I'm smoking pot. I got my dick out. That one.
Yeah.
That's the greatest song ever.
That's real catchy, man. I mean, the production's it's solid.
People come to me and say, "God damn, that what they call it." My friend said it's an earworm.
It is.
Once you hear it, you know that James Taylor's sister Kate. That's her favorite song.
Is
of all
it
people,
really?
James Taylor's sister, and everybody loves that song. And I did that song. The guitar player on that song is Frank Vignola, who's one of the greatest guitar players in the world.
Yeah.
And the way I met him was I became friends with, you know who Les Paul was?
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Well, me and Les Paul were very good friends. I met him at his 85th.
I didn't know that.
His 85th birthday party, I was there. My friend Carrie said, you got to come see Les Paul. You got to come see him. And I'd always heard, like, old people don't sleep. They just don't sleep. So he would listen to the Stern Show. So he knew the Stern Show inside out, and I didn't know that. And she said, you got to come. The Rolling Stones are coming. It's his 85th birthday, blah, blah, blah. So I was actually sitting there, and Les Paul was walking to the stage, and as he went past us in the aisle, I heard him say to the publicist, my friend Adam, he said, so Jackie the Joke Man is here tonight? And I couldn't believe my ears, right? So he goes up on stage and he says, hello, blah, blah, blah. Listen, there's somebody here I've never met before. Jackie the Joke Man, come on up here. So I went up on stage and he said, so you're Jackie from the Howard Stern Show? And I said, yeah. He said, and I didn't know at the time, but Les is a filthy bastard. He loved dirty jokes. He loved dirty stories, like all musicians. But, you know, this is a jazz guy. It's his 85th birthday. And they were so packed in, but they're jazz people and music people, you know, that are there to see Les Paul on his 85th birthday. And he says, so you tell dirty jokes? I go, yeah. He says, go ahead. Give me what you got. I said, are you sure? He said, I can handle anything. Give me your best. And I told him 5 of the filthiest jokes in the world. And it's so funny because he had thin red hair, almost, you know, it was thinning red hair, almost gone, and thick glasses, and he was arthritic and slight. I was talking to my father. I could almost get choked up right now. And we looked at each other, and I mean, sometimes it happens where you have that instant connection.
Right.
And then I told a joke, and he looked at, and he laughed so hard. And then and the audience is going berserk, going absolutely berserk. And then after about 5 jokes, I said, all right, enough of this. And I gave him a kiss and I walked off stage.
Man.
Meanwhile, Keith Richards is there with his mother.
Oh my
God.
God.
Goes, and I got he played a song and they said, I got another friend here. Keith Richards, come on up. And the first thing that Keith Richards said on that stage was, it's going to be kind of tough to follow that bloke.
That's coming from, wow.
So I'm still drinking. This is the year 2000.
Yeah.
I'm still drinking. I have a couple beers. I must have gone to see Les 50 or 60 times. And he had more people on that stage from all walks of life that you wouldn't believe. And never, in all those times, did I ever see him call somebody up a second time. And after Keith Richards got done and went back, I came up on stage. Oh, and Keith Richards' mother and stepfather were with him.
Wow.
Keith Richards' mother was a blues singer, which nobody knew. I still can't believe people didn't know. But Les Paul knew her. And I came on stage, and of course, she's a blues singer. She's a musician. She probably knew every dirty joke before I was born. And here's the people who packed in. So totally facetiously, I got up on stage and said, listen, before I go any further, Les, I just want to say, Keith, I want to apologize to your mother. If I knew she was here, I would have never told any off-color jokes. And I'm totally kidding around because I know, of course, you can handle anything. And Keith Richards stood up and said, yeah, well, I'll tell you a bit about your mom. And I said, and so he laughed and sat down. And I said to the audience, I'm getting heckled by a Rolling Stone. How cool is that?
Yeah.
And the place went nuts, okay?
Yeah.
They went nuts. So I turned to Les, and he says, listen, I had to have you back up here. He said, tell me about this Howard Stern show. Like, now, Adam tells me, you sit there, you write notes. What's going on there? And meanwhile, Keith Richards is sitting there, and he's got his braids, you know, and the colored scarf. He's rock star.
Yeah.
He's year 2000, but he's doing it up for Les's birthday. And he says, tell me about this Howard Stern show. And I said, Les, listen, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I can't believe you're a fan of the show, and I'm so tickled and flattered. But look, you got a full house of people here to celebrate your 85th birthday. They're here to hear your music. Do your show and play your songs, and when you're done, we'll go to the bar, have a beer, and we'll talk about the Howard Stern show. And you know what? Maybe Keith will join us. And you know what? Who knows? Maybe Keith will buy drinks. And you know what? If he hadn't got any money, maybe he could trade in some of those fucking beads in his head. I am telling you, it was like a bomb went off in the audience. It was the biggest, hardest, sudden laugh I ever heard. And when they calmed down, I said, and now I'm fucking with the Rolling Stone who heckled me. And they went absolutely nuts. And I hugged Les, and me and him had beers after the show. Me, him, Keith Richards' mother, his stepfather, and I got the pictures of that. And it was, and me and Les were just best friends from then on. And I wrote a line and went by the next Monday. He rehearsed his band every Monday, even at his age. And I gave him a joke that he used every night for the rest of his life. And we, you know, and it was just an amazing thing. And meanwhile, when I started going to see Les Paul, he moved from the Iridium, moved to a different place, and he had a band. And when he knew I was in the audience, he would call me up on stage, and I would go up on stage and tell him, I'll send you, I got a couple tapes of, you know, somebody videotaping from the crowd.
Please do, yeah.
And I would tell filthy jokes. And of course, half the audience had no idea what was going on, but Les would laugh harder than anybody. And I'd insult the guys in his band. And he had a lead guitar player. Yeah. Frank Vignola.
Oh, gotcha.
And after a couple times of going to see Les, I'm in the dressing room after the show, and he loves me and blah blah blah. And I went up to Frank. I said, "Listen, I feel like such a schmuck." I said, "Because you guys are like world-class musicians, and here's this idiot coming up and telling these stupid jokes. Am I annoying you guys?" And he said, "Are you kidding?" He said, "When you hit that stage, you bring so much energy up there. It energizes the entire room." I was like, "Wow!" And all of a sudden, that was my stamp of approval. And then I went up with Les a bunch of times and insulted everybody. Blah, blah, and then the next time I went into the dressing room, I said, don't take this wrong, Frank, but do you smoke pot? He said, what do you mean, do I smoke pot? Of course I smoke pot. And I handed him an envelope full of Jokeland Homegrown. And needless to say, I was pretty welcome every time I showed up from then on. And then one night I was driving home and I started singing this. I called up a girl who was a dear old friend, an old bang buddy. And she was in Las Vegas. So she was 3 hours behind me. And I got her answering machine. I said, oh, man, here's a big opportunity to talk. I'm not going to be at my apartment probably for an hour with traffic. We could have chatted. I'm sorry I missed you. Well, meanwhile, I'm talking on the Bluetooth because I've got the pot pipe.
You're preoccupied,
while I'm talking to her. So I said to her, well, Jay, I'm sorry I missed you, but I'm smoking pot and I got my dick out and I'm thinking about you. And I hung up.
That's the inception of it. Wow.
And then in my mind, I was like, I'm smoking pot. I got my dick out. Next thing I know, I'm smoking pot. I got my dick. And I had a micro cassette recorder. And I recorded, I'm smoking pot. I got my dick out. And I'm thinking about you. I'm driving along, singing a song. And I got my dick out and thinking about you. And I'm laughing. And I get home and videotape myself listening to the micro cassette, smoking a joint. And I called Frank and I said, Frank, I left a message on the machine. I said, I either just wrote the world's greatest song or the world's worst song. And I don't want to insult you as a world-class musician, but you got to tell me what you think.
Huh.
And I sent him that micro cassette recording. And he called back and said, that is the funniest fucking song I ever heard. We got to record it. We recorded it, and in the process of recording it, him and his guy said, we can't believe how much fun you are. Have you got any other songs? Well, I just happen to have 100 of them from 1975. And so we wound up making an album here in my house. And
wow.
And he's a dear friend ever since. So that's, I know you didn't ask for it, but that's the genesis of that song.
That's a great story, man. And Les Paul, I mean, he is a brilliant musician. I mean, the Les Paul guitar is, I mean, that is the musical standard for.
He's just such a character. I mean, he invented reverb, and it was behind a brick in his wall for 5 years. You got to read his story. We'd be in the dressing room between shows and he'd be telling me stories and people like, Les, they're waiting for the show. And he'd say, wait, I'm telling Jackie a story, Like him and Mary were in a basement in Queens and somebody came to the door and said, Les, like you should probably know How High the Moon just sold 100,000 copies, it's crazy stories. And he's just,
Yeah.
One of his favorite stories, he was the band leader for Bing Crosby.
Oh, yeah.
And he's taking a leak, and Bing came in and stood at the earl next to him and said, so how's the new kid? And Les said, pretty good, Bing. It was Frank Sinatra.
Oh, my God, really?
You can't invent that shit,
No.
And I'm talking to the guy, and he's a fan, and we're laughing our asses off. So sad to see him go.
Yeah.
But I recently found out they videotaped every time he played at that club. And the guy who's the head of the Les Paul Foundation found those tapes. He said, Jackie, I got so many tapes with you telling jokes to Les. I don't know if they're going to see the light of day because I don't know how many people want to see Les laughing at dick jokes, pussy jokes, fart jokes.
I think a lot of people would enjoy that. I certainly
would.
But
he used to go batshit.
Huh. Yeah, he is a...
And the line I gave him, he had a blonde stand-up bass player who was so cute and so talented, and she would sing a sexy song to him. And I wrote him a line to say about her. And when she got done singing a sexy song to him, he'd say to the crowd, I feel like a condemned building with a new flagpole. And the crowd, they'd go nuts. And he'd say, thank you, Jackie. And, it was a relationship, and that's me. I got no friends, but my friend was, I exchanged dirty jokes on a weekly basis with Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
Jokes just connect people. It's so much fun.
Well, and it also seems like even though I guess you could say you're primarily a comedian and a funny man, it seems like music does play a very significant role in your life with your friends. When you're
Well, it did. What happened was, in 1978, I realized if I ever want to eat, or maybe someday have a wife or a house, music's not going to do it. And when my last band broke up, I said, all right, I'm going to start doing this on my own, because then I got nobody else to blame.
yeah,
So I was playing songs and telling jokes, and then, I ran into comedians, and we actually started the comedy scene on Long Island. That's how long ago it was. My book is interesting. People say, wow, I didn't know any of that shit. It's like, it's fun.
yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. I mean, do you find any similarities between? Let's see. Do you want to do? Actually, I'm looking at the time right now. Do you want to do 10, 15 more minutes? Does that work for you, or you want to wrap it up? Or?
I'll do whatever you want to do. I'm sitting here. Where am I going?
Awesome. Yeah, same here, man.
You want to hear I'll tell you my COVID joke.
Let's hear it. Yeah.
So a guy knocks on the neighbor's door, and the neighbor answers. He says, hey, man, since COVID hit, I haven't seen your wife. And his neighbor said, oh, she's out back in the garden. And the guy says, well, I was just out there. I didn't see her. And his neighbor says, well, you got to dig down a little. Which is just the perfect COVID joke.
Yeah, I think, that makes sense. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about sort of if you notice any similarities between playing live music and comedy. For me, I'm primarily a musician. I have keyboards and guitars and shit around here. I record and produce, but I've found radio and being sort of funny, and it's a like you sort of get the same feeling, the sort of creative vibe. Is there any similarities, or are they just two different beasts?
It's all the same.
Really?
We're facing the wrong way.
Yeah.
Everybody else is facing this way, and we're facing that way.
Totally, yeah.
And that's essentially the difference between us and them. Whatever you're doing up here is besides the point. Jack Benny played the violin, and W.C. Fields was a juggler, and everybody, you do what you do, and they're completely different, but they're also essentially the same.
Yeah.
In your mind, you're hoping they're enjoying it. You're exuding complete confidence when you're frightened to death. The greatest comedians in the world walk off stage afterwards, and in their mind they're thinking, I fooled them again. You know what I mean? It's that crazy.
Yeah.
And I had such a love affair with music, because I don't know how well you do or what you do, but I know that how much you love your music, and how much you love to write music, and how much you love to perform music has absolutely nothing to do with how successful you are at it.
Totally.
Nobody was more invested in writing songs and loving music and playing music. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that, because I was drunk for the entire 70s. But when I wasn't drunk, I was, a lot of times my partner's out going to the bar, and I'd stay home and I'd write songs. And I loved them. I just wasn't any good. Some people love my songs, and, still people say, oh, you should have stuck with it, blah, blah, blah. But, I wasn't a guy that wrote a song that could be played on the radio. I wrote bittersweet songs about show business and stuff. Now I've talked to you. I didn't know you were a musician or anything. I'll send you a couple songs you might get a kick out of. Like show. They're like show business anthems, and you can see, like, of course nobody would ever play that anywhere.
Sort of the Steely Dan. Was it sort of a pessimism about show business, or where were you coming from?
No, just kind of like a diary. Like a poor me. I'm fudging along here, but I loved it. I wrote some. I got my heart broken really bad by this girl, and I wrote some really good love songs.
Huh.
But according to who?
Exactly.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm actually going Thursday to do a demo show. For a show kind of like yours. Now, is this a radio show or are we going to be on video?
Yeah, so I'll actually, I think now is a good time to say this. I will be posting this Zoom video on my Instagram where I could be found at Trevor Ray White. So anybody listening who would like to view this, go there. It'll also be airing.
Oh, so they can actually, they can't just hear us, they can see us.
Yeah, and also the audio will be on Rainy Dog Radio on the, let's think, May 12th. So tune in for that. But yeah, so tell me about that demo you were talking about.
Well, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm going to do yet. I'm thinking maybe I'm going to teach people how to tell jokes, or I thought I turned off the phone. Well, I guess I.
It's all good.
But the hold on, is he going to go off? Thanks to the COVID, the whole world has collapsed. My girlfriend, Barbara, who lives with me, this lovely, lovely girl, her and her partners have been booking bands and weddings and cover bands and comedians for 40 years. And I mean, business just, I'm sure you know, just came to a complete halt.
Right.
So she wound up moving. So now her office is next to me. So now we not only sleep together, have every meal together, but we have our desks together. And as far as I know, I haven't killed her yet, but she's great. And I'm supposed to remember to turn off the phones before I do these things. And I thought I did, but who the hell knows?
It happens. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's awesome, man.
But so I don't even know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to go in there with a guitar or go in there. I'm basically coming down to, I'm just going to show a few pictures and start talking, because you see that you don't get to ask many questions because I never shut the hell up.
This is exactly what I had in mind, man. You're a fascinating dude. I had no idea that you were so tight with Les Paul. That is very interesting.
Oh, you're going to get such a kick out of what I send you,
Yeah.
Oh, God. Well, see, I don't know anything. I didn't know you were a musician,
Yeah.
I mean, I have these wonderful old instrumentals I used to do, and I wrote all these kids' songs, and I got a whole treasure trove of stuff, and it never got anywhere. And then once in a while, people hear these songs, they go, "What'd you do with these songs?" I said, "Well, they're sitting on my computer," and they're like, and other people are like, "Wow, that was a waste of time," so you never know.
It's a hit or a miss. Who are some of your musical inspirations? Were you trying to emulate any specific sound, or were you just kind of doing your own thing?
I played in a band in high school. In ninth grade, my buddy said, "Hey," I said to him, "Hey, you play guitar?" And he goes, "Yeah." I met a girl in Sunday school who really likes Ricky Nelson. Said he was really cool. So I got a guitar and I'm taking guitar lessons. He said, "I could teach you 4 chords and we could have a band." And he was talking about C, A minor, F, G, common rock and roll progression.
That's all you need, yeah.
And I said, "All right." And we had a band for 2 years before the Beatles hit. I mean, we were playing oldies. Like Teenager in Love was already an oldie. That was from 1959, and here it is, 1963. We're playing Tears on My Pillow and Teenager in Love. We're already playing oldies. We started playing instrumentals, and at some point I said to him, "Listen, if we want to get anywhere, we got to sing." And he said, "But we can't sing." I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. We're not going to hire anybody to do it. We got to do it ourselves." And I had to be lead singer because I can't sing harmony. We were horrible. And then the Beatles hit. We played all Beatles, and but I mean, I love the 50s, and I wound up meeting these guys, like I went to Japan with like Benny King and people like that. And just like, they were so spectacular. I mean, I love the Beatles. I love the Beach Boys. And then of course, I was in college in the late 60s, Born at the Right Time tour, and Paul Simon and the original Bee Gees and then later on the Eagles. And, I loved them all, but I wasn't a good enough guitar player to have anybody be an influence on me. It wasn't like I saw, Eric Clapton play a C chord and say, "Well, that's cool,"
Yeah.
But I loved them all, it was just, it was to get drunk and meet broads, And when I was in college, I graduated, and I knew I wasn't going to get a job, and I figured, I might as well keep playing. If I'm going to be in the bars anyway, I might as well stay in the band. And so I It took me 7 years to get out of East Lansing, Michigan. And then I came home and we started a small band with just me and another guy playing guitar. And everybody loved us. We were really fun. We weren't any good, but we were really fun, you know.
Yeah.
That's been the story of my life. Not that good, but really fun.
Well, I don't know about that. I would disagree with that. Jackie, I mean, this has been so much fun, man. I'm such a big fan of yours. And frankly, I can't believe that we just talked for an hour. You're such a funny dude. I love you to death.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a bunch of my crap. I don't know. I seem to like you.
Please do.
I'll send you some songs and some stuff. And now, have you ever seen my book?
The Bow to Stern, that one?
Yeah.
I haven't read it. I'm familiar with it, but I need to purchase it.
Email me your street address.
Okay.
If you haven't already. And I'll send you some stuff. I'll send you the book. Don't worry, I won't quiz you on it. And I'll send you some Les Paul. I'll send you some interesting files and some songs. And then whenever we'll do this again, and I want you to have, 3 or 4, a bunch of questions about what you listen to.
Great.
And, maybe I'll even call you from my show if I wind up with a show.
That would be fantastic.
It's so weird because I don't want to do a show and sit there and talk about myself because that's asinine. But when somebody asks me, it always seems to come out fairly interesting,
Yeah,
But
I feel a similar way. I do this show independently, and so I just feel like I'm jerking myself off sometimes. I mean, it's I like to have guests on, in particular, somebody interesting like you. That's great.
You need somebody to bounce off of.
Exactly.
Even if I have an engineer sitting there going like, stand close to the mic. All right, you asshole. And, all of a sudden you got the rapport going.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, again, Jack, I can't thank you enough for this. This has been a real pleasure. I'll email you my information. And you are welcome back on the broadcast anytime. This has been.
I'm going to tell the people, anybody listening, I have a guy who answers all my email, me. So if you're curious about anything, I really do answer questions. Jokeland@AOL.com. I know it's so long ago, the Stern Show and everything, but, I heard from a guy like 15 years ago. A guy wrote to me and said, I live in Toronto, and I just discovered the Howard Stern Show, and I immediately loved it, and it became my favorite thing in the world immediately. And then I got so involved in it, I started listening to the older shows from the 90s. And you know what? It was like having a brand new favorite band and then finding out that their earlier albums were much better.
That's exactly how I feel, yeah.
How great a compliment is that? It's like I still think it's a great show and I love Howard, but man, that early stuff,
Yeah, no,
it's like Wings is fine, but I really love Rubber Soul.
I feel exactly the same way, man. And I'm from a young kid. I wasn't around for your time on Stern, but going back to it, it's exactly the Rubber Soul thing. I mean, I can't even begin to describe the feeling that you get watching old Stern. I mean, it is, especially in this day and age, it just feels so good to watch a group of
so free and so loose and so wrong and so, and my whole thing was, I always thought my laughter lightened the whole thing up, because Howard, they said when he was in Washington, he was crazy and funny.
Yeah.
But then when he got to New York, he was funny and crazy. If you insult people and you're mean and going crazy, if you end that with a punchline, it pops the bubble, pow! And you go to commercial and you come back and start over. All that tension, that's what a joke is. You set up tension and then it goes away with the punchline. It's it's like the constant set them up, knock them down. And I brought that element to the show.
Yeah.
Listen, you better hang up because I'll never shut the fuck up.
Of course. I'm going to give you a couple plugs before I let you go. You can find Jackie on Instagram and Twitter at Jackie Martling. He has a website called jokeland.com where you can see his upcoming shows. You can listen to his songs, see some videos, book a cameo if you'd like. He has a book on his website, 2 books actually. The Joke Man, Bow to Stern, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your reading material. You could get in contact with Jackie if you'd like to talk to him. Jackie, again, man, I can't believe that I got you on here. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm glad I did it, and it's fun to be talking to the exact opposite coast. If anybody out there is rich and they're having a party in Seattle, pay my airfare and buy me a steak, and I'm on the next plane. I want to come to Seattle. I want to see that stupid, what is it, a tower?
Yeah, the good old Space Needle. Yeah, that's.
And what about? Is the Jimi Hendrix Museum there?
It is. Yeah, I've been to it a couple
now,
times.
who's going to get that? Bill or Melinda? Who gets the Jimi Hendrix Museum?
I think Melinda.
Oh no, that was Paul Allen.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was the Paul Allen one. But I mean, Bill and Melinda are divorced now, so I think the city's going to catch on fire at some point soon. So we're going to see what's happening about that.
But. Hey, I got to tell you that I partied a couple times on Paul Allen's yacht in Cannes. I got lots more to tell you. We'll do this again.
Yes, man. Well, yeah, I'm gonna write that down just so when you come on next time, I'm gonna remember that. But Jackie, again, thank you so much for coming, man. This was such a blast. I wish you the best, and you're welcome back whenever, ma'am.